All right, welcome people to my video here on a presidential ranking tier list. I'm going to go ahead and rank the US presidents and see what we got here. Um, well, without further ado, I will go ahead and start. My name is Joseph. I do love history. Who knows? Maybe this might go somewhere and I'll do more than just a presidential tier list, but we'll see. So go ahead and enjoy this video. And if you like it, go ahead and hit like. And we'll see if in the near future I do more videos on different things. But for right now, we're going to go ahead and just do the presidential tier list. So I'm gonna make this a rule, and I got this idea from somewhere else, and also I just heard about it before that too. But I feel like not just feel, I know that the newest presidents, Obama and Trump and George W. Bush and even Bill Clinton, they're so divisive, and I just feel like I better just leave them out and exclude them from this video. So we're just going to go out to George H.W. Bush, and we will let history take a little bit longer before we do any ranking of the last four presidents. Now five with Biden, but Biden still hasn't finished his term. So we're not even going to comment there. So without further ado, let's go ahead and just get going with this. I'm going to go ahead and go from through the presidents by order, starting with George Washington and working our way down. This tier list is actually not one I made. This is on tiermaker.com. And so kudos to whoever made it. And from what I'm looking is most of the portraits we have, because they're mostly all portraits, are actually the official portraits of US presidents. I don't know where they're housed. That would be a good place to look, or a good thing to maybe look into. But that's not the purpose of this video anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and start off with George Washington. And George Washington, he's going to go right there. Superior. Why superior, you say? Superior, you say? Well, A, because he's the first president. He's the one that they were like, here's the Constitution. This is what the Constitution says the president should do. You were there when we made all these rules, and good luck. Yeah. So he had to find out and had to navigate through what being the first president was. And he set an example for all the other presidents that came after him. He also, how do I want to say this? He also wanted to, he set many precedents. That's what I want to say. He set many precedents. So he put his presidents put their hand on the Bible now, and they all did because George Washington did it. George Washington said, "So help me God." All the presidents since then have done the same. He retired after 8 years of being president, and 99.9% of presidents have done the same thing. They've, none of the presidents besides one other president did more than 8 years. All of them did either 8 years or less, because George Washington set that precedent of only 2 terms. So he is the father of our country, and I know we're just basing it on their accomplishments and whether they were good or bad for the country. But being father of your country, I mean, that just shows the high esteem that people had of him, even during the presidency. The other good thing about him was he kept us at peace during the revolution in France and the hostility between France and Great Britain, and both sides wanted to get the US involved on one of their sides, and yet he was able to hold back and say no. I'm drawing the line. We are going to go with neutrality because our country needs to be neutral for a while. We can't afford any wars. We can't afford any fighting. We can't do that to ourselves. We're already in debt. We need to pay off our debt first, get control of our finances before we can go into any war. And that was even with both sides pressuring him to go in. Those who were in favor of Great Britain and those in favor of France, both sides were trying to get him to get into the war, and he refused to do it. Also, he was able to navigate and go above politics. The first political parties formed during this time, or what would later lead to the political parties, you had Alexander Hamilton on one side. He was the leader of the Federalist ideas. And then you had Thomas Jefferson with other ideas, more along the lines of more states' rights. And Alexander Hamilton was more of a more central government type thing. So that was the ideas there for them. And Washington was able to be above that. Okay, he actually warned in his farewell address, he warned about America being divided by politics. And he wanted a united country, and he tried his best to be united while he was president. So a lot of good things. Of course, twice he was elected almost unanimously, if not unanimously. I can't really remember, but yeah. So he goes number one, superior list right there, George Washington. All right, next we have John Adams. Now, John Adams, great founding father. Probably, as far as founding fathers go, without talking about the presidency, John Adams probably ranks higher than Washington, probably higher, if not higher than Jefferson. It's because Jefferson was the main writer of the Declaration of Independence, which is the founding document. But I mean, John Adams is pretty much up there, way above and beyond even George Washington, as far as the whole political reasoning and things. And John Adams was a lawyer, so he was really good at his ideas of independence and things, just a very keen insight. And he is underappreciated a lot, underrated, but he's got to be at the top of the greatest founding fathers. But we are talking about the presidency, not the founding father time period, which is everything before 1787, the things leading up to 1787 of the founding of the U.S. Constitution. And we're post-Constitution now, and post-Constitution as a president, John Adams was just not great. I mean, for one, yeah, he did maintain the neutrality between England and France, but the whole XYZ affair just totally crumbled and was besmirched his presidency. And probably the worst thing about his presidency, was passing the Alien and Sedition Acts. That really puts him down in a low grade. The Alien and Sedition Acts was all about silencing political opponents for their views on the war or on the conflict between France and England. He was more pro-British, and whoever was hinting toward going to war or anything else, they were to be silenced. And so, yeah, he basically started silencing free speech. People were thrown in jail because of the Alien and Sedition Acts, and that was mainly going against a political opponent. So because of that, he gets a D. I mean, he fought a whole war for independence over issues like the Alien and Sedition Acts, and yet he goes there when he becomes president. So he signs it. I mean, he could have easily vetoed it and let Congress do whatever it wanted to do, but instead, no, he signed it into law. So the Alien and Sedition Acts really put him at a D in his presidency, even though as a man and as a founding father, one of the greatest. All right, so Washington, Adams. Next is Thomas Jefferson. And before I touch on him, first I want to say is I'm not doing this by character. If I did this by character, John Adams would be what he'd probably be at superior. His character was in many ways even better than George Washington's in a lot of points. But we aren't doing it by character. So we are doing it by ranking as president in good or bad. And I say that because Thomas Jefferson, he gets a lot of, slave owner, and, nobody has been pinned with the slave owner so much as Thomas Jefferson out of all the founding fathers. And mainly it's because of his supposed or his alleged child with, or children with Sally Hemings, his slave. However, there has been, since the first announcement that the DNA matched Thomas Jefferson, there has been a lot of questions surrounding that DNA test, I guess you could say. The reason is because it's not very conclusive. The DNA is a Jefferson's DNA, but the problem is they can't really pinpoint if it was Thomas Jefferson. And unfortunately, there were many Jeffersons related to Thomas Jefferson that lived around Monticello, that lived near Thomas Jefferson. A lot of his brothers and his, I don't know if he has sisters, but his immediate family lived near him, visited him often. And there actually, some historians are starting to say that the culprit for the Sally Hemings children might be Thomas Jefferson's, I think, brother, who at the time would have been exactly right for Sally Hemings to have had one of her children at a time when Thomas Jefferson's brother had recently lost a wife, was in despair, and may have done something there with Sally Hemings. But I say all that just to say that Thomas Jefferson, really, it's not conclusive, or maybe it can never be known if he is exactly that. There is DNA Jefferson. There is a Jefferson DNA in Sally Hemings' grandchildren. However they found that out, it is true. It is Jefferson DNA. But is it Thomas Jefferson or another Jefferson remains to really be seen. So we have Thomas Jefferson. That's as far as the character goes. But Thomas Jefferson as president, he's going to go into A. Why the A? Well, we have the Louisiana Purchase, which doubled the size of the United States. This was done basically unconstitutionally, I gotta admit, but it did double the size of the United States, and eventually Congress followed up and signed it into law, or he signed it and they approved it. What ended up happening, though, what's very interesting is in the whole slavery and free debate, was that the Louisiana Purchase actually was had a provision in it when it became a territory to basically outlaw slavery from the Louisiana Territory. Now, the Louisiana Territory includes everything from Louisiana all the way up to Arkansas, Missouri, and on over close to Oregon, all that area, North and South Dakota, Montana, all that. So Jefferson signed into law a bill saying that the Louisiana Territory, that slavery was not allowed in the Louisiana Territory. That was law. That became law, and he signed it. Basically, that limited slavery. It stopped it. It confined slavery in a certain area of those few southern states that were there. Of course, things would change as they did later, but that was a plan, was to keep slavery confined to that area, make the Louisiana Territory, all of it, free of slaves. That didn't work out later. But, and people I know might disagree, feel free to leave your comments and tell me why not. I am open to hearing suggestions of why I am wrong about that. But that is my opinion on that. Anyway, so we have Thomas Jefferson. So he did that. Another great thing was the Barbary Pirates. It's the first international war that we had. So the Barbary Pirates basically were demanding money from European countries, from the United States, to be able to travel through the Mediterranean Sea, and for their ships to travel through the Mediterranean Sea to do business. So we're talking about merchant ships, and they were exacting a toll, or a they wanted paid for you to be going to the Mediterranean. Well, Thomas Jefferson said, our country is small. We can't afford to pay what you guys are requesting. And also, you just jacked up the prices, and we really can't afford that. So Thomas Jefferson said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to go fight you and beat you. That way we don't have to pay anymore. And that's what they did. While all the other European countries cowered and paid they cowered, they shut up, they paid. Thomas Jefferson said, no, we're getting rid of this system. It's not working for us. And he went in there, defeated the Barbary Pirates, and said, we are not going to pay you anymore. And they agreed. All right. So that's Thomas Jefferson there. Very strong with foreign policy, domestic policy. All right. Next is James Madison. Now, James Madison, as a president, did fairly well. Where did he go? Let's see here. Oh, there he is. So here we have James Madison. He did fairly well. Mainly, he led the United States through the War of 1812. There we go. The War of 1812. Kind of him and his party's fault for getting us involved to begin with, but overall, not a bad we ended up drawing there and preserving the United States, making sure that we did get our territories. The British were basically sitting on our territories, the Northwest Territories. They had forts there that they weren't abandoning. And the War of 1812 kind of said, hey, guys, get out of there. That belongs to us. Better evacuate. So I guess he consolidated U.S. territory and made sure that the strong British Empire got out of there for good, out of our land. He's also the father of the Constitution, and very smart man, very capable to be president. But besides the War of 1812, not a lot of extra stuff there that would get him higher or get him lower. So it's a B. Next, we have James Monroe. James Monroe. Let me see if I can find this guy here. Somewhere here. I see Pierce. Oh man, I am not finding James Monroe really. Oh, there. I found him. All right, so here's James Monroe. The era of good feelings. So in this era of good feelings, the economy was doing better, whether it was because of James Madison or not. Anyway, the economy was doing better. People were getting along better. North and South were getting along better. Just good feelings all around. Also, during his presidency, the one thing that stood out was, I just forgot. Sorry, I'm having a mind blink here. My mind's going blank. Yeah, ergo fit. Oh, the most important thing. Monroe Doctrine. So the Monroe Doctrine was basically telling Europe, listen, we don't want you to be coming over to the Americas, to the recently freed from European tyranny Latin American countries. Stay out of there. If you get involved, we're going to get involved, and we're going to help them repel you and make sure you don't stay. And basically, he allowed the Latin American countries to he didn't allow it, of course, it wasn't in his power, but he protected them from Spain trying to retake them. What happened is, after they won their independence, or they won their independence while Spain was they won their independence while Spain was dealing with Napoleon, and Napoleon had taken over Spain, and during that time they had won their independence. Well, after Napoleon was defeated, Spain wanted their colonies back. And so they were actually plotting and planning to come back and take over the colonies again that gotten their independence from them. And that's what James Monroe was talking about. He was trying to prevent them from ever coming back, those European countries from ever coming back and taking back over their lands, especially Spain. So it was a warning to Spain. So that is actually very good. It wasn't imperialistic in any way, as I've seen some history people say. It wasn't at all about that. It was about protecting American interests, but also protecting the interests of the recently won independence of the Latin American countries. So he gets to be a B there. Also very smart man, very qualified to be president, very good president too. All right. So after Monroe, we have Adams, John Quincy Adams. Let me find him here. Okay. It's kind of a little bit hard to find them in their portraits here. There's Van Buren. I don't want to get him confused with John Quincy Adams. I found him. So John Quincy Adams, a lot of people, I've seen a lot of other people who do these tier lists on YouTube, they will put John Quincy Adams at a C, which C means nothing good, nothing bad. But I disagree with that. He may have not done anything extraordinary as in flashy or anything, but the one thing he did facilitate was building of canals, building of railroads, building of better roads, infrastructure basically. That is on him and his administration, and planning that out and cooperating and helping and all that was mainly under him. So I'm going to put him at a B, mainly because of that work of building our nation's infrastructure. And that is very important. And a lot of the roads that we have now are built over the roads that were built during his administration and because of his administration. So we're going to put him there in B because of that, his influence on that. All right, so that's John Quincy Adams. After John Quincy Adams, we have Andrew Jackson. Now, again, this guy, at least, what all the bad things you hear about his character, true. I mean, slavery is bad. Slavery is wrong. No matter if you're a good slave owner or a bad slave owner, whether you treat your slaves well or mistreat them, slavery is still bad. It's immoral. But Thomas Jefferson, the way Thomas Jefferson treated his slaves compared to the way that Jackson treated his slaves, totally opposite. Totally opposite. Jackson just acted basically like if they were animals or didn't have feelings. I mean, the whip was out and he would whip them himself. He would just wicked, man. Treated the women slaves badly. Of course, I may have kids watch this sometime and I don't want to go into details or anything, but just horrible president, and really as a character, just horrible. But I'm not ranking them as in their character. All right. If I did, he'd be an F. But because it's not character and it's just presidency, we're going to rank him as a president. And as a president of the United States of America, for the good and bad. For the bad, we're going to ding him because of his Indian removal policies. I don't know if it was under his presidency that the Trail of Tears happened or Martin Van Buren's presidency that happened, but in either case, it happened because of Andrew Jackson's policies. So that is what puts him one tier lower than what he could have been. But what puts him one tier higher than a D or an F is that one, he preserved the Union. There was a big nullification crisis, and South Carolina was threatening to secede along with other southern states. He kept them together, mainly because he was from the South. But he was also very pro-Union and didn't believe that the South had a right to secede. Number two, the National Bank. He did away with the National Bank and was not a proponent of it, did not like it, and got rid of the National Bank. Right. So he got rid of the National Bank, and yeah, and that was a good thing. So it was just badly run and corruption and all kinds of things going on there. So he did away with that. And for that, he gets a B. So he was a very good president. Again, his lifestyle, character, definitely an F. But as a president, all by itself, a B. And that's where I'm going to put him. So after Jackson, we have Van Buren. Van Buren was the same as Jackson. But with him, we can definitely put him as a D. Where did Van Buren go? Oh, there he is. Crazy hair guy. All right. So we're going to put him as a D. He didn't do much. I believe, if I'm correct, the Indian removal was under Martin Van Buren. The Trail of Tears and all that was under his administration, but it was from a policy coming from Jackson to him, and he actually, I believe, carried it out. I might be wrong, so feel free to comment on the post if I did get that wrong. But I heard somewhere that was actually under Martin Van Buren that it happened, not under Andrew Jackson. But if I'm wrong, you can please post it in the comment section below, and I'll be free to change that up. My opinion, or not my opinion, but the facts are that it was actually Jackson, then it was Jackson. Okay, but I heard just recently somewhere that was under Martin Van Buren. Okay, so I'll leave that at that. In any case, even if the Indian removal wasn't under Van Buren, but under Jackson, the best I could give him was a C, which would put him as a mediocre president, not really doing anything good, not doing anything bad, just basically sitting in the chair for a while. All right, so that's Martin Van Buren. After Martin Van Buren, we have William Henry Harrison. Is it? No, that's John Tyler. All right, so let me look through here again. Oh my, these, you cannot, it is a lot harder for sure. That's McKinley. All right. Oh, there he is. William Henry Harrison. Now, William Henry Harrison didn't really do much. I tried to make my own tier, and I would have had underneath that a non-rank or a no-rank place, and that's where I would have put him, because after all, he only served 2 weeks, 1 week, something like that. He gave this long speech on a rainy, cold day in March, I believe, or April, something like that, and caught pneumonia. And it wasn't too long after that he died. So he really didn't get to do anything at all, except for be sick and die. So I'm going to put him at C, because it's not positive, it's not negative, but I really wish I could have learned better how to do another tier. I tried it on another site, and these B, C, D, F was not working out for me to be able to do that. So anyway, I couldn't, on the site, I couldn't edit any of that. So I left that site real quick. So we'll just put those in the C. There's going to be a few of those, and they'll just have to be C's. So that's what we got right now. Then after Harrison, oh, this is funny. So when Harrison was chosen to be president by the Whig Party, they wanted to get Southern votes. So in order to get Southern votes, they made William Henry Harrison's running mate, John Tyler, as vice president. He was from the South, and they figured, well, we'll get some Southern votes out of this. And sure enough, they did get the Southern votes that they needed, pushing William Henry Harrison into the presidency and dragging John Tyler as the vice president with him. So that plan backfired because William Henry Harrison didn't last long. 1 week, 2 weeks, something around there. And next thing you know, John Tyler, the Democrat, is now president. And so that really didn't rile up, but threw the Whigs into confusion. But I will say this, the Democrats thought that they were going to get something more to their liking, but he ended up making them mad too. And so he made them mad. He made the Whigs mad. Everything he wanted to do, neither party liked. And so his presidency was very uneventful. The only thing he did was push for the including of Texas into the Union, but he only got to the pushing and not the actual admitting of Texas into the Union. So we will put him into C. Who we won't put into C is the next president, which is James K. Polk. Now, a lot of people, or I saw a lot of YouTubers, and I saw a lot of YouTubers and other influential people doing tier lists, presidential tier lists. I saw them put Polk high, like a B, an A. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going with that. I get that they are all excited because, he increased the size of the United States by including Texas, including New Mexico, including Arizona, California, Nevada, I think, Utah, maybe, Nebraska, Kansas, something like that. States up in there, Colorado. All right. And they say, oh, yeah, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. And it would have been a good thing if it was done correctly. All right. I'm sorry, but I grew up in Mexico. And even if I didn't grow up in Mexico, one of my favorite presidents, who at this time was a member of the U.S. House of Representatives, was against this acquisition of territory from Mexico, mainly because of how it was acquired. So Texas was admitted into the Union under James K. Polk. The problem is that Texas was a part of Mexico. Now, Santa Anna, the previous dictator of Mexico, when he was defeated at the Alamo and then Sanchincito, he basically gave his permission for Texas to be independent. However, the Mexican Congress did not agree to giving them that independence. And actually, when Santa Anna returned to Mexico City, he was exiled by the Congress. So the Mexican government did not recognize Texas as independent. All right. During Santa Anna, when Santa Anna became dictator, there were actually several Mexican states that rose in rebellion against them. Texas still was the most forceful of them, but there was a couple of other states that are still a part of Mexico that rebelled against the Mexican government, or mainly against Santa Anna, mainly because the Constitution of 1824, Mexico's Constitution, had been basically done away with by Santa Anna, just by him, not by Congress or anybody else. He had just taken it away. And basically Texas's beef wasn't with Mexico or its constitution, it was with Santa Anna. So, as well as other states that rose up in rebellion. So, Mexico didn't recognize the independence of Texas. And the Whig Party wanted to kind of stay away and stay out of it. They didn't want war with Mexico. They didn't want to cause Mexico to be to be offended, or to give them a reason for aggression or anything else. Wanted to keep the peace. But the Polk and his party, they were looking to expand slavery. And that's the reason why they were okay with admitting Texas. That's why they were looking toward Mexico and wanting more land to balance Congress, because they felt them losing Congress. as far as the House of Representatives and the Senate, because that all has to do with the states, and there was going to be more slave states more free states than slave states. And so the Democrats felt threatened by that, and they wanted more states, and they wanted to form more states. So what did they do? They looked to Mexico and thought, oh, look, we can take this land from them and acquire it for more slave states. And because that was the reasoning for acquiring all those states and all that territory out west, I am going to put Polk at an F once I find him. Is it this guy? That looks like him. I'm trying to look here, but I think it's him. So F for Polk. All right. That is just, to get into that war for those reasons, not a good thing. All right. So I'm going to leave Polk right there at F. All right. Another thing. Our U.S. troops, our U.S. soldiers went into that war and died to win some more territory for more slave states. All right, to put it that way. Okay, so that's James K. Polk. So after Polk, we have Tyler. Yes, I forgot about him. Tyler is another one of those that I need to, if I had a no rank or non-rank tier, I would put him there because he ate some ice cream, got a cold, never recovered, got sick, and he ends up in C. Didn't do much, didn't do anything basically, and so that's where he sits. All right, so now we have Millard Fillmore, and I need to look for him. He is somewhere. I'm going to say it's this guy. I think this guy is Millard Fillmore. If I get it wrong, we'll just fix it later. He was basically a C president. Nothing big happened. Nothing pro, no con. I think Missouri Compromise happened under him. Anyway, he goes there. So we have Millard Fillmore. Then Franklin Pierce. So he basically did nothing either. Some of it was for good causes. On his way to Washington to become president, his only son got decapitated in a train wreck, and so Franklin Pierce was basically a wreck for the rest of the campaign of the time his time in office. Got drunk a lot and basically didn't do much there. He was incapacitated for most of the time, rightly so. If you see your own kid get decapitated on your way to Washington, D.C., it will leave quite a mark there for the rest of your life. So that was Franklin Pierce. After Pierce, we got another really, really bad president in the likes of James Buchanan. If I find him, I think this is James Buchanan. And I'm going to put him as an F. Why as an F? Well, during his presidency up until the end in 1861, he basically did nothing. Not a lot of things going on. He wasn't trying to temper down the South into not seceding. He just kept quiet all about it while they were all talking about it. And when Lincoln gets elected, under his presidency, 7 southern states leave the Union. Well, he's president. He does nothing. He says nothing. He just watches. Basically, his strategy was, just throw it on the next guy that comes. Basically, Lincoln. When, while Lincoln gets elected, all these states secede. The first shots of the Confederacy on federal troops, federal property, was actually under Buchanan's presidency. Buchanan sends the Star of the West, I think it's called, or Queen of the West, something like that, a transport ship, down to Fort Sumter to give it provisions. On its way into the harbor toward Fort Sumter, the Confederates fire on it, and it ends up returning to Washington, D.C. without dropping off its supplies. Buchanan did nothing. He said, well, they fired on it. Okay, I'm just going to give this to Abraham Lincoln, which is what happened. And that's why I give him an F, because even when something happened important in his presidency, he turned the other cheek and pretended he didn't see it was going on. So the next guy we got up is, of course, our dear Abraham Lincoln. And he, of course, is going to go all the way up to Superior. There is no one like Abraham Lincoln. No politician has ever surpassed him up until this point. Abraham Lincoln is the standard for all politicians. Any president that is a politician, or anybody who's a politician who aspires to be Abraham Lincoln, should really take their notes from him. He knew the Constitution inside and out, and he kept the Union together during a hard time. No other president has had it as hard as Abraham Lincoln. He saw the United States completely south or north. To him, even during the war, there was no Confederacy. There was a rebellion of states. He never saw the Confederacy as its own nation. He saw them as states that were in rebellion against the other states and threatening the Union. And so he kept it together. Now, some cons are, his main con actually, is that he suspended habeas corpus during, right after Fort Sumter. And he did so without the approval of Congress. Now, the Constitution does clearly state that habeas corpus can be suspended in cases of rebellion. So there's a rebellion going on, so there is a constitutional protection to suspend habeas corpus during a rebellion. However, the Constitution is not clear if the president has the power to suspend habeas corpus or the Congress has the power to suspend habeas corpus. Now, I believe it falls under, when it's talking about the Congress section, toward the end it mentions it, but it doesn't say Congress has the power to, it just says the power of habeas corpus, some generic like that. So maybe Lincoln thought, well, I don't know if it is or if it isn't. Maybe he said he leaned toward Congress being it, but because Congress wasn't in session, he decided to act then. But he suspended it. And he suspended it, and then later on when Congress did convene again, they approved the suspension and kind of worked behind them. It's the same with the raising of the 75,000 volunteers. Lincoln kind of just did it, and when Congress came back later, they approved it. So he just had to act then, and if you were president, you'd probably be doing, and in his position, you'd probably do the same thing. So Lincoln, and he kept the Union together. I really believe that had he been still president when the 14th and 15th Amendment were passed, which I think would have been passed a lot sooner than what happened, because obviously Johnson came in and he wasn't going to approve that at all. But it would have been approved faster, and he would have been the president to be able to guide and eloquently convince the South to embrace Black equality as far as voting goes, if not even further, but at least as far as voting goes, embrace Black equality. I think he would have been the perfect president to be able to convey that into a convincing manner in order to get them to do so. That's my opinion. I think he would have been able to do it. He just had the sentiment. He had the words. He knew how to communicate it well. He knew how to, he said with malice toward none and charity toward all. And he was going to show that charity to the South. And I think he would have been able to convince the South to do it, to go along with it. At least, if not the bigwigs or the ex-plantation owners, at least most of the common people who would eventually vote later. I think he would have been able to sell it. Unlike Grant. Grant, he did have that same heart. He did want the South to accept it, but he just wasn't a great communicator. He just didn't have the words. He was more of a silent man, didn't talk much, didn't give speeches, didn't do anything like that. So, even though his heart was in the right place, he just didn't have the power to convince, as Lincoln did. And I think Lincoln would have been able to bring that, at least voting equality, to the blacks and had the majority of the South go along with it if he would have been able to live. So he was sorely missed after that. All right. Next, we have the next letter F president, Andrew Johnson. Now, hopefully I can find him in here somewhere. Is that a younger version of Andrew Johnson? I'm looking here and I do not see anything else that resembles Andrew Johnson. So I'm going to say that this is Andrew Johnson. And it looks like that's probably him. All right. Must be his younger version of himself or just a nicer painting of him. Anyway, YF? I mean, he looks pretty dashing right there. But anyway, letter F. He's going to be there mainly because just horrible at Reconstruction. On one hand, he didn't really care about equality for blacks. I think he actually vetoed the first attempt at the 14th and 15th Amendments. He vetoed them. So on the one hand, he was not caring for civil rights. On the other hand, he was way too harsh on the South, too. I mean, the South just hated him as president, and he just made it difficult for them. He was very pro-union, which is why he became vice president of Abraham Lincoln. But he was too harsh. No charity, no malice toward none type thing. Just really hard. And it would have been a harsh Reconstruction period if he would have stayed. The only thing going for him in the South's perspective was he didn't want to give equal voting rights to blacks. But besides that, the South didn't really like him. That's the era of carpetbaggers and all that corruption in the South and by people from the North and all that. Just horrible time. So that's Andrew Johnson. Next, Ulysses S. Grant. Now, a lot of people put him in B. Normal historians probably give him a C. But this is where I'm going to put him. Right up here in A. And I believe he deserves it. And I'm going to explain why he deserves it. Because in his presidency, except for the Indian affairs, which if you read about him and what his views on the Indians were, very good. But he trusted the whole Indian policy to people like Sheridan, who is very racist toward Indians, and also William T. Sherman was very prejudiced toward Indians as well, or Native Americans. And so they didn't treat the Native Americans very well. Grant kind of just left it all up to Sherman and Sheridan. All right, he didn't really get involved. Indian wars happened, and he didn't really investigate or anything because he just trusted his lieutenants to deal with it. All right, and just like in a lot of other areas, Grant trusted his friends to do things, and he shouldn't have trusted them. So it wasn't that he had something against the Indians. It was just that the people he trusted had something against the Indians, and Grant didn't see it. He thought that they were keeping the peace for him, that they were making sure the treaties were being respected. He thought all of that was going on, and instead the opposite was happening. Anyway, so we have, so on the Indian policy, I get it. But what he did for the civil rights is just above and beyond what any other president has done, ever. And I mean, the 14th and 15th Amendments, he signed them into law. Signed them once they passed Congress, once they passed the states, he signed them. But not only was he there for it, he enforced it. um, he wasn't going to let the South slide away with all their rules and making and trying to suppress the vote. That was going on under, or it started happening at the very beginning when it happened. But when Grant heard it, he sent in the soldiers. He said, "Oh, we're not doing it that way. I'm going to have troops at the polling places to make sure that the black men can vote." And lo and behold, there were black black Americans who were became U.S. House of Representatives. I think a couple of senators, if I remember right, were black Americans. And then in their state houses, state senates, I mean, black Americans just basically took over the legislatures of these states. And it was just a great time for states' rights. One of his commanders, Adelbert Ames, he had the section that covered Louisiana, Mississippi, and parts of Texas, things like that. He actually desegregated the military under his command. At first, of course, at that time, it was seen as an experiment to see how it would all turn out. But he desegregated his command, and blacks and whites served together. The regiments became mixed, and Grant approved of it. He actually was very much interested in how it would all turn out, and he gave the green light. He approved of it, and it was just a great time. And that's why I think he goes up there, because even with all the corruption and even with the downside of the Indian affairs, it wasn't because it was him. It was the people he trusted. And that's where it was all downhill. So, but none of it goes back to him. And his civil rights just outshines everything there. I mean, the greatest civil rights president ever, like I said. All right. So after him, we have Rutherford B. Hayes. And I was reading about some of Hayes. He was a candidate that got in. That's Chester Arthur. I don't know if it's him or is it this guy here. I know he had a big long beard, so I'm going to go with this guy here. And I will give him a B. I was just reading about him. He did some against the antitrusts and things, and he did some good there. Nothing really bad there. Well, one downside, and it wasn't really his fault, it wasn't because of him, was the ending of Reconstruction. The ending of Reconstruction really hurt, especially African Americans or Black Americans. They were really hurt by that. Not because he didn't want it. See, he was trying to fund the military, to keep the military that Grant had in place down there. He was trying to keep it down there and keep it funded. The problem was that the Democrats took control of Congress, and they kept on passing bills that they kept on passing bills that would include a lot of things, including not funding they would pass a bill, and Rutherford B. Hayes would say, "Hey, I'm not signing it unless you put some money toward the troops." And then what would happen is, and so Congress and the president were in a stalemate. So in order to satisfy President Rutherford B. Hayes, they would say, "Okay, we'll do this amount." But the amount that they proposed was enough to fund all of the troops, to maintain all the troops down there. And so he had to end it. The Democrats were just really in his way, and he really couldn't do anything but stop Reconstruction, sadly. So that was under his watch. But some of the breaking up the monopolies and things like that. That was under him, and that was good because there was a lot of corruption going on between big business and a lot of the Republican Party and government and things, and he just kind of cleaned that up. Also, or maybe I'm getting him confused with someone else. The one thing that I would do remember that I right now am remembering is his view on the spoil system. So when they would get elected, all these people that helped them get elected, and all these people he knew, all wanted to have jobs in his government, and he was the first one to say, "No, I'm going to choose you on merit, and not just because we're friends." And so he started doing that. So you know what? If I remember right, I may be wrong about the trust. Let me just check that real quick because I don't want to be wrong. I had him at a C when I did this on my own. And I just want to confirm if I have that right. Give me one moment here. I'm going to pause this and look real quick. Okay, I'm back. Yeah. So it wasn't him that did the antitrust. That's somebody else that's coming up later. So I'm going to actually put him back down to see where I had him before. So nothing really big, nothing really bad, nothing good, nothing bad. I mean, Reconstruction ending, that wasn't really on him. That was just the Congress he was dealing with. And he tried, but it just failed. Even the North was just tired of it and things, and you can condemn the Republican Party for, letting that go and not being forceful. Of course, he's the president, and if Congress would have had a bill that would have kept on funding the troops in the South, he would have signed it immediately and kept them down there to view the polls. He didn't get rid of the Justice Department, which was started by Grant, in order to make sure that the votes were being counted, black votes were being counted, and that there was no suppression of votes. He did keep that there. He kept it funded. However, what happened, as I was reading, is that the marshals would go and they would report it to take it to trial, but the jury would for the most part just ignore, and not guilty. All right, so the jury really messed everything up there. So that was Rutherford B. Hayes. So after Hayes, we have was it Garfield? I think it was Garfield. Or was there somebody else in between? I know it's after Garfield, it's Arthur, and then Cleveland. So, trying to remember. Let's see. Polk and Taylor, Fillmore, Pierce, Buchanan, Lincoln, Johnson, Grant, Hayes, Garfield. Yep, Garfield. So here we go with Garfield. I'm going to put him here in the middle. Again, he's another one like William Henry Harrison. Dies at the very, not even 6 months in. Taylor, not even 6 months in, he's dead. Garfield, not even 6 months in, he's dead. Garfield probably gets a C plus, mainly because his heart was in the right place. Big civil rights guy. He approved of the way Grant handled the whole civil rights issue. He knew what was going on in the South, how it was all going back, how everything, blacks were being suppressed. He knew about it. He wanted to do something about it. He was very outspoken, was not afraid. It's funny because he actually was a dark horse in the Republican convention. He wasn't even on the ticket. It was President Grant, who was actually running for a third term. First time, only time it's ever been done. No, not only time. Sorry. First time it was ever done. Only two times has somebody run a third time. One of them was Grant. The other one, maybe we'll mention it later, but was FDR. But Grant was running for a third term. And I forget who his opponent was. Maybe it was Rutherford B. Hayes. I can't remember. But it was between Grant and somebody else. Maybe Hayes. And they just kept on tying. So Somebody said, well, why not Garfield? And then little by little, Garfield started accumulating more and more and more votes until finally people just said, you know what, I want to go home. Let's vote Garfield in. And so Garfield got elected as a dark horse of the race. Very pro civil rights. If he would have gotten in, I think he would have he would have had a Republican Congress. He would have gotten Congress to get those troops back to the South, or at least died trying. He was that much for civil rights. He would have been a great president if he had not been shot. But because we are not basing it on what they might have done or they could have done, he gets a C. Again, if I had a tier down here, he would go down there to the no rank tier. All right, so there's Garfield. Then after that, we have Chester Arthur. Now, Arthur, again, a middleman. He was for the civil rights, attempted to get back to Grant status, Grant things, or maybe it was Benjamin Harrison. These guys are kind of confusing, mainly because they didn't do anything, and you can just try to pick at them, and all you'll do is be picking at bones, because nothing really big happened. Maybe some antitrust busting there, getting rid of some monopolies that were trying to just become monopolies, and he just broke them up in a way. Antitrust, anyway. Middle of the road. Nothing great, nothing horrible. Just right there, where he's not endangering the country. So we have Garfield, Arthur, Cleveland. Cleveland, we'll put him as a B. He vetoed a lot, but they were good vetoes. Like, they were the vetoes that you're glad that he was vetoing at all. The Democrats were wanting to pass some legislature, and even though he was a Democrat, he vetoed. I think he's known as a president with the most vetoes or something like that during his presidency. I mean, he vetoed and vetoed and vetoed anything that they threw at him. And so it's like a positive negative. So it was positive they vetoed, even though nothing was happening. But if those things that were happening would have been passed, the country would have gone in a bad direction. He was very good, economically sound, and things that even his own party didn't like him. All right, but the Republicans did get along with him very well, more than even the Democrats, unlike John Tyler, both parties said, bye, see ya, you're just there, we can't wait till the next election. All right, and of course, Cleveland is the only president who has had 2 terms, but they were non-consecutive. So he got voted in, then he lost the next time, then he got voted in the next election. All right, so nothing big. If anything, he'd get a B minus, but he's there. All right. After him, let's go with Cleveland, Harrison, Benjamin Harrison. I hope I can find him. You know what? This guy looks like Arthur. That looks like Arthur. So this might be actually Benjamin Harrison. Anyway, again, antitrust going against them. That's kind of good, but it's not really impactful. There were strikes under him that he used the federal forces to put down. I mean, the strikes were they did turn into riots, destroying property, other things like that. So he ended up having to send in the troops. Once he sent in the troops, actually the riots quieted down. When the riots were against state troops, I mean, there was all kinds of bloodshed. State troops were getting killed, rioters were getting killed, or strikers. But when he sent in the federal troops, it kind of calmed. Well, the strikers weren't about to fight the U.S. Army, so it kind of they calmed down and things. But again, middle of the road president, nothing positive, nothing negative. All right. So that's Harrison. I almost want to think Tyler, but no. So we have Arthur, Garfield, Arthur, Cleveland. Oh, Taft. So Taft. All right. Taft, he was again another middle of the road president. Nothing tremendously big, nothing tremendously bad. Just right there, right in the middle. Um, okay, I think next is McKinley. Yeah, so next is McKinley. Now, this guy, he led us he led America in um, the Spanish American War. Now, the movie Rough Riders is great and everything, and wonderful, great patriotic movie. Theodore Roosevelt, an event. Theodore Roosevelt, they're leading the men up San Juan Hill, all that. But we all know that that war was avoidable, and America fell behind because they weren't as imperialistic as all their European pals, and they wanted a little bit of that glory and acquisition of territory. And so basically, any excuse to fight Spain was on the table. And when the USS Maine blew up accidentally, they blamed Spain and got into a war with Spain. At least with Cuba, they won Cuba, and then they gave Cuba their independence immediately, allowed them to be their own country. But there's a war which I hadn't heard about until I read a book by James Bradley. James Bradley, the author of Flag of Our Fathers, Fly Boys, some other ones. And he wrote a book not on McKinley specifically, but about that whole time period. And basically his point was these events during the time of McKinley and Theodore Roosevelt and eventually led to Japan taking over the Far East, China, and everything, and leading basically to our involvement in World War II. And a very good and insightful book. I don't remember what the name is off the top of my head right now, but in that discussion, most of it was focused on what happened in the Philippines, the Philippine War. And I had never heard of the Philippine War. I had heard that we acquired the Philippines in the Spanish-American War, but I didn't know that there was a Philippine War. And when I was reading about the Philippine War, I was the whole time thinking, what are we doing in the Philippines? And why are we doing this to these people? So basically, we landed in the Philippines. And there was already a war leader, a general or a guerrilla leader there who was already fighting the Spanish before we even got there. So before the Spanish-American War, this guy and the Filipinos were already at war with Spain and were fighting against the Spanish. And we came in to help him. And we told him specifically, we will help you take out the Spanish, and then we'll give you your independence. And this guy was excited. I mean, he loved the United States, big fan of the United States, loved the founding fathers, loved the Declaration of Independence, loved the founding of our country, the United States. He just was in love with the United States and its history. And he wanted that for his people. And indeed, he had him and the other leaders of the Philippines. They had written a constitution that basically was a mirror image of the U.S. Constitution. I mean, that's how much it was, how much he liked the U.S. And they were ready for their independence. They were ready for self-government. They were ready to become their own nation. They were excited. They thought the United States would support them. And then McKinley backtracks and says, nope, we're going to occupy you. And they said no. And so they started a war against the United States because they're like, we didn't just win our independence from Spain just to come under you. And they just totally took control of basically started a war against the United States. And that's when we started waterboarding, and that's when we started a lot of different torture tactics on these Filipinos who all they wanted was their independence. And McKinley basically, and I'm going to just paraphrase a quote from the book, and that allegedly um, um, McKinley said something like, "These people are not ready for independence." And in some case, and in some of the writings, maybe even from Theodore Roosevelt and others, it was almost like the Filipinos were just too inferior to be able to govern themselves. And it was just a really racist type of mentality toward the Filipinos at that time. Very sad. And so that's why I don't put them high or even in the middle. Some people I've seen put them in B. I'm going to leave them at a D just for that. I mean, he started a war against Spain that we shouldn't probably have started, that we didn't need to start, all because he wanted to expand the U.S. territories. And then two, he totally goes full bad guy against the Filipinos, to put it nicely without, going too far. All right, so that's McKinley. After McKinley, we have Theodore Roosevelt. All right, so Theodore Roosevelt is known as the first progressive president, and there are a lot of things I don't like where he got the government involved in so many aspects of the government. Now, it wasn't under him. I think it may have been under Taft or others that they broke up these large companies like Carnegie and Rockefeller. They were just using the federal government in order to buy up their competition. I mean, they were in bed with the government with a lot of Republicans. They were just buying up the competition. And so Taft or Arthur or even Cleveland, somebody, one of those guys, they broke them all up. And then you had Theodore Roosevelt, and he did some more breaking up and things, which it had to be broken. I mean, some of those monopolies were just ridiculous. Especially, my big beef is they were doing so with help from the federal government. That's not how capitalism should work. But anyway, at any rate, Theodore Roosevelt. So there's a lot of things that he did that increasing the federal government things. I do agree with some of his breaking up of companies that he did as well. Some of it, not all of it. But just the federal government getting more involved and things like that. I mean, if it wasn't for that, I'd put him at an A. I would. But because of that, I have to bring him down to a B. National parks, great. Yep, that was great. Panama Canal, that was another great accomplishment. He was a man's man, the John Wayne of the era. And I mean, he was rich, city boy, but he did so many things that totally took him away from being a city boy any longer, that you could hardly consider him a city boy just because he was like everywhere. Anywhere where there was no civilization, Teddy Roosevelt liked to be there. So he had all those things going for him, but I still can't put him at an A just because the progressive thing is just not mine. Where government takes more and more control, that it just goes it goes too far. And as a conservative, I would not agree with him. And there were many conservatives, even Republican conservatives, who were against that. So, anyway, but still a B. I mean, I think I did pretty good there. So we have Roosevelt there. And after Roosevelt, we have, is it Harding, Coolidge, and Hoover? I think so. So we have Harding. I think that's Coolidge. That's Wilson. Where is Harding? Is it this guy? I think it's this guy. All right. So here's Harding. Well, I'm just going to put him there. He wasn't really that, again, pro or con. Economically better than Roosevelt. He wasn't a progressive, but also he just didn't do much. I mean, let's be honest. He didn't do much. The guy who did do much positively, especially economically, was this guy right here, Calvin Coolidge. And I'm going to put him as an A just because he just a great leader. Took us through the roaring 20s, a good chunk of the roaring 20s. Economically, America was booming. I mean, the quality of life in the United States under his presidency was far above and beyond any other country in the world, even Europe. I mean, he did a great job economically, and mostly it was saving. His big thing was saving, and he wanted to save. Um, didn't want high taxes for the people. Just save, 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 save. That was his model. I mean, they tell the story of the pencils that the people, the bureaucrats, were using to write. He made sure that they whittled down that pencil like to this size before they could, toss it to get another one. I mean, he was all about saving, and America was just a powerhouse economically under him. Even the poor people could afford cars. I mean, all kinds of great stuff going on under his administration. But then we had somebody that ruined all of that, and that would be Hoover. And this guy, I think, is Hoover right here. Hoover, D. He ruined it. Why? He was a progressive. And I'm gonna about to get that to that because his predecessor was just the same way. Um, the guy who came after Hoover said that all of his ideas came from Hoover. And Hoover was all about expanding the federal government even more and getting the government involved in things like electricity and the Hoover Dam, electricity and natural resources and things like that, and just more regulations that ended up killing the industry, which is why we ended up with a Great Depression. All right. Also, the tariffs that were in Europe kind of caused a Great Depression too, because Germany couldn't. No, wait, this is before, or did it? Did I jump somebody? I think I jumped somebody. Oh yeah, this is way after. Okay, I jumped somebody. So yeah. Anyway, tariffs on Germany, and Germany couldn't pay because this was after World War One. So yeah, I give him a D. He brought us a Great Depression because of his progressive policies. The guy that we forgot was Woodrow Wilson, right here. Yeah, this guy. F. Now, most historians, and it's because they all agree with the progressivism and things, they actually rank him high, but he is going lower. The latest ranking from historians put him like at a C, something like that. But I put him as an F. Racist, segregated all of the bureaucracy before the bureaucracy wasn't segregated. Under all the Republican presidents, the bureaucracy, even I think Cleveland, the bureaucracy was not segregated. Blacks and whites worked together, same offices, they shared the same restrooms, they shared the same facilities, they did everything together in the bureaucracy. Now, of course, we're talking about the South. Washington D.C. is in the South, so when blacks would go back home, back again, Jim Crow, right outside. But within the bureaucracy, everything was desegregated. But he's the one that segregated it all again. I'm sure you guys have heard of Ida B. Wells. She made a big stink about the segregation going on in the bureaucracy again. So that just tells you that there was no segregation before that. So just racist, nasty person showed the Ku Klux Klan's film, and they're just nasty, nasty guy. And yeah, so he led us in World War One. Okay, I mean that war. Now World War Two was a lot more dangerous. Just Hitler and things, way more dangerous. But I mean, we didn't even have to join World War One. We could have just sat there, and the Germans and the French and the British would still probably be fighting each other today along those trench lines, and we could have been happy just sitting back, relaxing, and chilling, because nothing was going on anyway in that war. I don't know. Maybe it would have turned out differently. Maybe eventually the French and the British would have gotten out of the stalemate. Maybe the Germans would have gotten out of the stalemate, and then we would have had to join the war. But I mean, at the point we joined the war, they were just, both sides were just sitting in trenches looking at each other, and really, who cares? All right. Anyway, he was kind of a little bit trying to be nicer to Germany at the end, but yeah, I mean, yeah, just and then of course you have he did the same thing that John Adams did in time of war, time to throw your political opponents in jail just because they oppose us going to war. So he was there too. So that even puts him to an F. At least John Adams got a D, and that's because he wasn't racist. All right, so we have Woodrow Wilson, F. Who is this guy? Is this George H.W. Bush? I hope so, because I don't want to skip anybody. Next, I believe we have. If I skip somebody, that's just too bad. Okay, that's Eisenhower. They're just a little bit harder to see from a distance. Either that or I need new glasses. All right. Yeah, that's it. Okay, so where's FDR? We are going to go ahead and touch on FDR. I hope I see him here. Okay, so that's Eisenhower. So is this FDR? I can't tell. All right, I'm going to put pause on this. I'm going to take a... All right, I think I got it. I think this guy's FDR. So, FDR. All right. So, people say certain historians say, let me correct. Certain historians say he led us out of the Great Depression. Well, sorry to bust their bubble, but I'm no historian, and no, he did not lead us out of the Great Depression. Actually, he admits in one of his writings that he borrowed all of his ideas for the IRA, NRA, all those things that ended with an A. All those government programs, he even admits that he got all those ideas from Herbert Hoover, but that he just made it bigger and better. According to him, better. I would argue not very better. But all of his ideas were, basically copied from Hoover. Did the Great Depression get better during Roosevelt's time before World War II? I mean, yeah, there was an increase of GDP, but it was so slow and so lame that we actually never got back to the great booming economy of the Coolidge years. I mean, never got back to that. I've seen the rates of GDP during the time of Coolidge as president, and then, every single year of FDR, and it just never was the same again. Just always bad, bad, bad. And the GDP, the GNP, all those things were just bad, bad, bad. And did it go up a little bit? Yeah, but never back to the Coolidge times. I mean, if you want to compare Coolidge to Roosevelt, I mean, Coolidge is way better than, Hoover or FDR. And actually, I think it was in 1938, things were going up gradually, but then all of a sudden in 1938, there was another depression, a depression within a depression. So nothing he was doing was great. And 2 years later, we were in World War II, and that got us out of the economic troubles. So I thought about putting him in a D because of that. But I can't, because World War II is just too important to ignore. So I'm going to put him at B for his leadership in World War I. Some people would want to put him at A, and the really progressive people and their historians like to put him at an S, but I'm not. All right, I don't agree with his politics. I believe his economic politics made America worse during that time. If it was better, it was so marginal. But still, 1938, another depression, like really? Yeah, no. So, but World War II, he got us through that, leader, and he was a good leader. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong, well, except for the Japanese internment camps. I mean, that's a dinger right there. But he let us do that. I don't agree with him buddy with Stalin at the end. That was a lot because of Alger Hiss, the little communist running around in there. But I mean, World War II, those were critical years, and he was a great leader for that. And the soldiers loved him and respected him as their president. a lot. So, gotta give credit where credit is due. So I will put him up in B. Then we have Roosevelt. Oh, yes, we have Truman. Okay, Truman, Cold War guy. And he was, he wanted to stop the spread of communism. So that's positive. Um, and he did a good job at stopping them. But that's all. Like the Korean War, he could have done more. He could have gotten into China, and we wouldn't be in the mess we have right now with China being a superpower. So that was on him for not pushing. But kind of, his hands were tied. I mean, it was a UN joint operation, and so I'm sure the Europeans were holding him back and all of that jazz, and that's what you get for depending on the UN. But so there is that. But I mean, he was willing to fight the communists. He had no problem going in a hot war against the communists. There was the Berlin airlift where he was supplying the Germans. So I will put him at a B. Next, we have so we have Truman. Eisenhower. Oh man, Eisenhower. I gotta put him at an A. I'm sorry, but civil rights and communism. That was, I mean, if you do both civil rights and go against the communists at the same time, that's a home run right there. Home run for him for being against the communists, strongly against the communists, and then also he civil rights. I mean, he was the pro civil rights guy right there. The whole Arkansas and getting those black kids in school and protecting them and all that was him right there. Sending the Rangers down, all that. Yep, good stuff right there. Big advocate for civil rights. Okay, so we have Eisenhower. Then next we have Kennedy. All right. Kennedy, great speeches. Very anti-communist. I mean, his party didn't like him because he was so anti-communist. I mean, his party at that time, the Democrats, were trying to cozy up with the communists, some of them, maybe a lot of them. He was very anti-communist, prevented the Cuban Missile Crisis. The one thing I have against him as far as presidency goes, because his character was not good, but we're not judging by character, was the Bay of Pigs. I mean, that was a disaster. I mean, if you're going to say you're going to help somebody, help them. It would have been better if you would have told I would have been okay and fine with him saying to the Cubans, you know what, that's just too much to ask. I advise you not to go. We are not going to support you. And I bet you those Cubans would have said, fine, we're not going to go. All right. And done deal. We're just not going. But instead he said, yes, I will support you. So they go, they land on the beaches. They're waiting for air support, and he doesn't show. And they all get slaughtered on the beaches of Cuba. Dude, no. I'm sorry, but no. So I will put him at a B. But if he would have gotten an A if either he would have fallen through with the Bay of Pigs, or if he would have told them, no, I'm not helping you. I can't. That's just going to create a mess. At least be honest. But he didn't, so that's the route he took, and that's why we end up with Cuba there, and all those people died in vain. So that's a big dinger. But I'll give him a B for being strongly anti-communist, and I mean, a lot of great speeches. He also the moon speech, getting us on the moon, but also let's not over glorify him, because we tend to do that just because he was assassinated. And I mean, he was assassinated. He did more than Garfield, but at the same time, he was no Abe Lincoln or the second coming of Abe Lincoln either. All right. He was, though, more for civil rights. I will give him that. He was for civil rights. So another reason why he should be in the B. And we're going to get to that with the next guy, but I believe his heart was actually in the civil rights movement. But as far as Lyndon B. Johnson, who we're talking about next, his heart wasn't there. I'm sorry. But yeah, he did sign the he did sign the Civil Rights Act. Yay, hooray! But if a Black American can be believed, while he was on a uh, plane flight trying to convince some Democrats to vote for this, he said, if we pass this thing, we'll get the, he used the N word, for the next 200 years or 100 years, something like that. So allegedly he said that. So even if he didn't, that was kind of his attitude toward it. He was very racist. He didn't really care for blacks or their plight. He wasn't like Lincoln. He actually cared. I mean, ever since he was a young man and went down to New Orleans and saw slavery, he was just repulsed by slavery all of his life. The same with Grant. All right, yeah, maybe his revulsion with slavery started when he first bought a slave and then freed him almost immediately. All right, so that was the first time he did it, and so when he becomes president, he really doesn't like it, and he didn't like slavery. He really from his heart wants to give blacks the right to vote. I mean, he was serious about it. The same with Andrew Garfield. Again, very outspoken when he was a congressman. Very outspoken against what was happening in the South, and very much for enforcing the 15th Amendment. His heart was in the right place. Same with Dwight D. Eisenhower. His heart was with the Black Americans. But I'm sorry, you can't convince me that Lyndon B. Johnson was ever even slightly for blacks, except for to protect his legacy. That's all. The Black Americans were there just for his legacy, just so he could be seen as a good guy, and he knew it, and that's why he did it. His heart wasn't in it. I'm sorry. So he gets a D. Then you have the Great Society, which I would say the Great Society has done instead of help the Black Americans, it has actually hindered them, pulled them back, and destroyed them. And they've never been the same. I mean, before he became president, Black Americans were prosperous. On average, there was still problems and race issues. I will admit there were, but they were pretty prosperous, and they were very independent, prosperous independently. All right, and that was a good thing, and family values and all that, and it's just gone downhill since the Great Society. The Great Society did not help them; it made it worse for them. All right, and it wasn't from the heart, and even the Great Society wasn't from good intentions. Just not. It wasn't. He did not have good intentions. He was racist, a racist. Period. All right, so that's Lyndon B. Johnson. So after Johnson, we have Kennedy, Johnson, and then is it Ford or is it Nixon? I think it's Nixon. Let's see. So that's Reagan. That's Carter. I know that's later. Gerald Ford. Yeah, he was vice president to Nixon. Okay, so Nixon. Again, D. I mean, I can't say anything good about him. Oh yeah, Lyndon Johnson. Another thing that dings him down there. Vietnam War started by him. All right, went in there. I mean, kind of am for us going in there, kind of not. The reason why I'm not is because we couldn't go in there with all the tools we needed. We were pulled back, all that kind of stuff. We couldn't go in there with an intention to destroy the enemy. So we were basically playing patty cake and getting a ton of our soldiers killed by playing patty cake. All right. Anyway, we have Nixon. All of our problems with China is because this doofus decided that we should be trade partners with China. All right. So thank him for us depending so much on China. Before him, most things were made in America, farms growing, everything American. Then this funny dude comes in, and now China rules the world and all of that kind of stuff. All right. And so, yeah, that was a bad decision. Very bad decision. And it has cost us. Also, Watergate, can't forget that. Can't be doing that kind of stuff to your political opponents. All right, we have that. next comes Gerald Ford. Gerald Ford, middle of the road, not really good, not really bad, just kind of let things go as they were. Next, we have Jimmy Carter. And Jimmy Carter, I mean, come on. The economy just totally collapsed with Jimmy Carter. I mean, my dad tells me about the gas lines and all this kind of jazz. And it's like, really? Seriously? We could have done better. Then you have the whole Iran thing, and it looked like we couldn't even do military stuff right. I mean, helicopters crashing in the middle of the desert for hostages, and it's supposed to be covert, and then the whole world knows. I mean, just a disaster. Good man. Won't say that. Actually, he's a Baptist. I'm a Baptist. But yeah, as far as economic policy goes, destroyed our economy. As far as the way the world saw us, I mean, we basically look like our army was just a bunch of army men from the toy box. So yeah, not very good. D for him. Then next we will go with Reagan. And yeah, a lot of people still, progressives, don't like Reagan and probably never will till who knows. Maybe someday they'll actually appreciate him. I don't know. But the left doesn't really like him, even though I do still see him ranked pretty high in the presidential ranks. But he basically undid everything Carter was doing and got us out of the Great Depression, or Great Recession, whatever you want to call it. And, gas lines disappeared all of a sudden. All of a sudden, Iran said, oh, yeah, here's your hostages. You can have them. We apologize. And they were basically all kissing his feet. And then he told Gorbachev to go tear down that wall. And sure enough, the wall came down. And the Soviet Union wrapped up shortly after he left, but it was already wrapping up and falling and crumbling all over the place while he was president. So that was good. His policy against them was good. So economically at home, everything good, and all abroad, positive too. Then next, we have, lastly, and this is where I'm going to end, we have George H.W. Bush. And I'm going to put him right here at C, just an average president. He continued on Reagan's work as far as economics go. Also, I mean, you have the Gulf War. My dad participated in the Gulf War. He was a U.S. Marine during that time, or was actively serving, was called to be active. Wasn't active. He was reserved, but then they called him to be activated, I guess, to get ready to be sent over, if you want to call it that. And, but, I mean, the war in Kuwait, it was to, free Kuwait, but as far as that having anything to do with America, I don't know. It seems like a little bit of a stretch that we should have anything to do with that. It was good for Kuwait. I mean, I'm not saying we shouldn't have responded, but it was a UN joint operation that really did not affect the U.S. In any way. So right there in the letter C, average presidency. All right. Well, thank you very much for watching this. I hope you enjoy it. Maybe learned a little bit something. Again, if I got something wrong or you want to express your opinion, you can go ahead and put it down in the comment section. Thank you very much and have a great rest of your day.